Bobby, when were you diagnosed with Tourette's?
That was between 78, 79, right in that area. I think I was right around 13 years
13.
old.
When did you start having symptoms?
Probably about 12 years old. I went through several years of mom and dad just thinking that I was acting out, and they, and on their behalf, when you have a child that is jerking and yelling and blurting out things and things like that, and I knew I just couldn't control it, and they didn't hated to have to punish me, but they wanted me to quit.
Mm-hmm.
And at that time, Tourette's really wasn't a real pronounced thing. I mean, it was just coming on the scene right around that time.
Mm-hmm. When you would say curse words?
No, I didn't. I don't know. I think I had enough of God in me, of being raised in a house of God, that I don't know. There was something that kept me from doing that. Mine was more like barking and yelling. More like a ha ha or something like that. Just screaming out, and the perfusive jerking, just jerking hard, so hard that it would jerk my guts. And I would stay sore as a child, and it really, it was just a traumatizing thing. And Dad, my dad, he's a Church of God minister, and he would say, "Son, you got to quit doing that," and I took some spankings over it and things like that, and Dad, once he found out about this thing, he really felt real bad about it. Him and Mom both.
But you were going to church?
Yeah,
All this was going on?
Yeah, Dad got saved, I think, right around 72, 73, somewhere like that, and that was a big thing in my life, because I knew that the change that God had made in Dad, that there was a God. I knew that what I seen in my dad when he come out of Vietnam, and the time when he got saved, because up until that time it was pretty, anything went back then. I guess maybe you think about that kind of stuff, but yeah, I remember they first misdiagnosed me when Mom stayed by my bed one night. She told my dad. She said, I remember telling him, say, Bob, she said, there's something wrong with him. There's something wrong with that kid, and I don't know what it is, but we've got to figure out what it is. She said, I'm going to stay up tonight, and if he does this in his sleep, then we know that there's a problem. And sure enough, she took a chair, and Mom worked a full-time job. Mom and Dad both worked, and she sat beside my bedside, and that next morning, I remember, if I can say it without crying, I remember her grabbing me and hugging me and saying, I'm sorry that we've been this hard on you, but there's something wrong. We got to get you fixed. We got to see what's going on. So I went to a pediatrician in Dayton, Ohio, where I grew up, and it was a little Asian lady, I think, and she diagnosed me of having a severe epilepsy, but I never had no seizures or anything like that. And they put me in Children's Medical Center, misdiagnosed me, pumped me full of Haldol, Dilantin, and high levels of it.
Probably phenobarbital.
Yeah, and I was pretty much a zombie from the age of 13 to 14, 15 years old. Those 2 years of my life, I have a real good, strong memory of everything before then, and then those 2 years, I can't remember a whole lot. The only things I remember is being so sick, and Mom and Dad, this was during the time, I think Carter was coming out of office, and the economy was in a real bad shape. Dad had worked 14, 15 years at Dayton Tire Rubber, and they had come in and told him that they were shutting the factory down, and at the same time they diagnosed me with this.
With Tourette's?
With Tourette's. He lost his job, and all these things were happening, this calamity, this is just like a huge tragedy, and I seen such hurt and suffer in my parents' eyes. I remember them send me to Cincinnati once they found out, we found another doctor. His name was Richard Dorsey, I think, down in Cincinnati. It was a pediatrician. And keep in mind, during all that time, we never missed a prayer line. Whenever they had a prayer line, Dad, he encouraged me. He said, son, he said, always, he said, anytime they have a prayer line, get up there if you can and let them lay hands on you, pray for you.
Because the prayer of faith shall save.
Amen.
Yeah. Somebody could pray the prayer of faith.
He never gave up the faith during that time. So anyhow, we they sent me down to Cincinnati, and we went to this doctor, and he come in and he said this is a rare disorder. He said, but I know what's wrong with your child. He said he has Tourette syndrome, and we didn't know anything about it. So they put me in a hospital in Cincinnati and withdrawed me from all the medication that the other doctor had me on. I went through withdrawal symptoms for, a month, coming off of all that stuff. I remember the first 2 weeks in that hospital, and I think it was in a psychiatric ward, I shook like a rag doll. I just shook. I couldn't stop shaking. And to go back just a little bit, right prior to that, I do remember a few things in church. I was so sick in church that I couldn't stay out in the service. Dad would pick me up and hold me in his hands, and I was a pretty good sized boy, and carry me back to one of the Sunday school rooms and lay me on the Sunday school table there. And he'd tell me, he said, if you need me, he said, you just come get me. I was scared to death. I didn't, my whole world was shaking as a kid. Everybody else was running, playing ball and everything else, and I was just like a zombie. And I remember him taking me back there and laying me down, and then, like I said, we went to Cincinnati, and they went through the withdrawal thing, and so I was right back to square one. Once I withdrawed from all that medicine, I was right back to the jerking profusely, just hard, yelling out and barking like a dog. My brothers and my friends, we always made fun about it, because they would lighten up the situation, try to make it light.
How did you do in school? I mean, how was this affecting your schooling?
It was horrible. The teachers didn't really know nothing about it.
They thought you were acting up too?
Yeah, and in middle school is where I was when I was officially diagnosed. I think I was about 13 years old, and from what I gather, that's a real bad time for Tourette syndrome in kids when they develop it. But they had the teachers. I remember. I'll give you a few incidences here that happened. One teacher, I was wanting to be like a normal kid. I wanted to, because I had a couple of friends. I didn't have many friends because to them I was considered a freak, and I'd had a couple incidences or a couple things where I'd actually gotten into a fight with one girl. Matter of fact, she had, in front of everybody, she started yelling at me and pointing her finger at me, calling me a freak and everything like that. And I actually wanted to, I wanted to get my hands around her neck, and I knew that it was bad, but the teachers broke it up and they pulled me back and pulled her back. But the one teacher picked me up while I was sitting in my chair in the classroom in front of everybody. And I remember him saying, "What is wrong with you, boy?" Like that, and he picked the chair up with me sitting in it, and it was the combo chairs where you had the desk and the chair hooked together. He picked the whole thing up with me in it, and just kind of slid me out in the hall, kind of slammed me up against the wall, not me, but the chair, and said, "You're going to have to stay out here." So I spent my days out in the hallway during that time, and a lot of times I just bow my head and just bawl. I didn't know what else to do.
Right.
And that went on, and then in high school, I had a teacher that.
Did they get you on any medicine that helped you?
Well, that was when after they sent me to Cincinnati. There, they started to pinpoint on what the problem was, and at the same time, I was starting to learn a little bit about faith, and I was learning about how to trust in God and how to believe. And my dad directed me the best that he could, and I was coming at an age. I was coming of age where I knew what was right, what was wrong, what salvation meant. What being saved meant. So about the time I become, I guess, 14, 15 years old, I'd gave my heart to the Lord back then, as a child. And, I basically, I'd kind of leveled out to a place where I could kind of go to school a little bit, but I was still having problems. I was still jerking real hard and yelling out. It got, it was so bad that the teachers come and recommended that they take me out of school and give me a home teacher.
Right.
And Mom and Dad, Dad lost his job. Dad wasn't even working. His insurance had collapsed by that time. We were really struggling. And all the time, Dad, I remember, like I said, I had told you there earlier, him coming in from work. And I was in the bed sick. And it was just me and him home. And I don't know if he thought I was asleep or what, but I was just in there just kind of in another world. And I remember him bowing his head at the supper table and crying out to God. And Dad was always kind of a I don't want to use the phrase tough guy, but he's always, he was not a real super emotional person when it comes to these kind of things. But I heard my dad break down, and I heard him cry out to God at the table there. He bowed his head, and he said, God, he said, Lord, he said, why is this happening to me? He said, I pray, I believe, I trust in you. I pay my tithes, I can't understand. But he done it as he was praying this, he was in tears, man. He had his head bowed, crying out to God. And there's no way you can mimic that. Right. There's no way you can mimic that. It's just but at that time, he, they took me out of school, and I got a home teacher, and I think it was all the way up until about the 11th grade. They had gotten me under control enough where I could get back into class. But keep in mind, all this time, I was believing and praying and trusting in God, because I knew God was going to take care of it. More than anything that I wanted to do, I wanted to play music.
Play guitar?
I wanted to play guitar.
When did that start, your desire to play guitar?
It was the same time that I started to develop. They had diagnosed me.
Wow.
And, the doctor, Dr. Dorsey, had told Dad, he said, he said, I hate to be so negative or anything like that, but he said he's not going to function like a normal child. He said the normal things that other kids do, he's not going to be able to do. He's not going to be able to play ball. He's not going to be able to do these things. And I wanted so bad, and my heart was to learn how to play guitar. And I went to an after-school class, one class. They gave guitar lessons, the teacher did, after class. And or after school, and Mom and Dad had enrolled me in that, and I went one time, and the teacher come up, talked to Mom, said, I'm sorry, but we're not going to be able to do this. He doesn't have what it takes, was his words. He said he doesn't have what it takes to be a musician. He needs to find another hobby that he can do. And man, you could have done anything. You could have crushed me. I was sitting right here. It was painful. I went home, and I just sat on the side of the bed, jerking and jumping, and just bowed my head. And I remember Dad coming in, he said, son, he said, if you want to play music, he said, you hit every prayer line. Every time they're praying for somebody, he said, if you want God to heal you, he said, let him know it. He said, and serve him with all your heart, soul, and mind. And God blessed me. He, I had just started watching other people, and it was a thing that helped me heal too. I believe that music of course, it's a part of your life. It's part of all of our life around here where we live, but it was a blessing to be able to start learning and proving that I could. But it was most of all I was doing it through the Lord. God gave me the talent.
Right.
What talent I have, I mean, I'm sure, there's a lot better players. There's a lot
man.
of.
You're great, Bobby. I love what you do, man.
I thank God for what He's given me, Russ. Man, I do. I thank Him for great friends, you, Dan Ward, Dave Morrison, all the guys
We
that
love you, man.
really helped me out.
Shoot, you've been a blessing to all of us, man.
But back to the Tourette's. This had went on, and I got married, and I called Dad up. I said, Dad, I want to get off this medicine.
Did you finish high school?
I went all the way to the 12th grade. I come up about 5 credits short, and I think it was science or something like that, or geography or something like that, one of them classes. I just never did go back and get them, because I missed so much school when I was in high school.
Right.
And I come up a few credits short, but I just never did let it phase me. I guess a man probably should go back and get it, but it hasn't affected me this far. But anyhow, back to that. I started getting better, and I started learning more. I started as far as playing the guitar, and I'd actually got good enough to. I took a road job with a band, and
what, you got married?
Yeah,
right out, like
out of high school. Yeah.
Out of high school, very young. You got
Yeah.
married, and had you actually started playing in bands by then?
Yeah, I'd kind of started just playing a little rhythm and things like that. Just nothing real major, but it was during that time I was still healing and still. I had a few problems here and there. But I knew that God was on the scene because I was getting to where I could function like a normal child or like a normal young man. I mean, I went to work. I took auto collision and vocational school. I co-op there the last 2 years of my high school years because I could go to school 2 weeks just to that class, and I could do my other studies at the house. And I become what they call a collision man, And
body work.
I've done that for about 20 some years, and all this time, there's a lot more to this story, but this is an important part. When I got married to my first wife, I completely got healed and delivered of this disease. I mean, I knew the moment that I did because I laid the medicine down. I laid everything down. And I told Dad, I said, Dad, I believe that God's going to completely take me out of this thing. And through that time, through arrogance and
how old were you when you feel like you got?
I was about 20 years old. I was about 20 years old, and I remember, I'll never forget, I took a job down in La Follette, Tennessee at a body shop down there, and I was laying in the bed, and I had ran out of the medicine that I was taking, and I would go into, at night, if I didn't have that medicine, I'd go into like some kind of like a seizure type of weird type of thing that I couldn't control. And I knew I was still alive, but I couldn't move. I couldn't do nothing. And I told the Lord at that time, I said, God, if you'll take this away from me, I won't take that medicine, And I did. I made it through it, through God's help. And at the same time, I kept getting better and better on the guitar. And it's like those stories you hear a lot of times when people forget, when God blesses you through a healing or something, or a major blessing like that, a man should never forget that, and always praise Him and never leave Him. And it's true, like I say, what the Bible says. When you leave the Lord, man, it's a lot harder coming back. And
Mm-hmm.
like I said, through the arrogance and through all this, God had done healed me and delivered me and set me free. And I left God's love. I was convinced that I could make money playing, music on the road and doing all these things, and uh, indulging in that lifestyle and still be okay. And I went through a lot of hard years there. There's a lot of things that happened there, and I'd become a drunk. I had actually become a drunk. And all the time that I was on the stage playing for this band, I played for a band called Blue River. All the time I was on stage, I remember thinking, I was so convicted because of what I went through as a child and all the trauma, all the things that I remember the kids making fun of me and Dad praying for me and crying out to God and things. And I'd be up there and I knew that I was in the wrong place because God had done healed me, took care of a disorder that
You had got off medicine, started drinking,
yeah,
and like getting drunk.
Yeah, I got completely away from the Lord, but I knew that it was wrong, for...
Was your wife supportive of you?
No.
Mm.
Not at that time, and she's a really good person to this day. I love her to pieces, I'm remarried, she's remarried, and I don't support any kind of divorce at all, but at that time, I pretty well damaged our marriage,
Mm-hmm.
and I just started spiraling downhill.
Mm-hmm.
I went from being what I was when I was a child with all that to no popularity, no nothing, into having all this. I was indulging.
On stage and
yeah, man. I mean, I had anything I
and,
wanted. Yeah,
yeah,
the whole 9 yards.
drinking, probably drugs too.
Oh yeah, yeah. Anything that I could probably pretty well get my hands on.
Weren't you playing on the Indian reservations?
Yeah, I played at a bunch of the grand casinos, I think, and several of the no brand casinos, what I call them,
Mm-hmm.
from all the way from Minnesota, all the way out to by California and Nevada, and during this time, like I said, I'm coming to a part of this story that's really crucial. Right at the end, when I was with Blue River, I just about partied myself out. I come out of Minnesota. I think there was 72 inches or 70 inches of snow in some places.
Mm-hmm.
14 degrees. The next day, at the end of that run of shows that we done there, I was in Biloxi, Mississippi, and it was 80 degrees. And I'd been up for weeks, partying. And all the time, I was just the most miserable person. I mean, all I could ever think about when I was on stage, I would reach out and grab alcohol, girls, drugs, anything I could to calm or to take this pain away, because I knew that I'd left God, and I knew that I'd left a healing, or I knew that I'd left what I'd been taught. And we were coming out of I think Elko, Nevada, and we went to Mississippi. I don't know if it was Jackson or somewhere around there. There was a casino around there somewhere, and I was playing on the Indian reservation at one of the casinos. And the last night of that show, we were headed back to Nashville for a showcase. After that show, we'd been there for a week, and I told one of the guys, I said, I'm sick. And, the guys in the band, you always tease each other. You're just a big sissy and this and that. I said, no, something's wrong. And I knew that morning I'd get up before everybody else, and I'd go walking before we had a show. And I could tell that my lungs, I wasn't breathing right. Well, by the end of that concert that night, I started losing my breath. I couldn't even get a breath. And by the very last song, I was starting to see stars. And, here I was, in such a mess, a terrible shape. God delivered me, set me free when I was a kid, healed me, and done so much for me. And I walked off, and here I am in this situation. Lost my family. I pretty much just destroyed my life.
Mm-hmm.
And I was coming off the stage, and I told them, I said, something's wrong. By that time, I started just about passing out. They said, let's get a medic here real fast. Well, they took me back to the Indian Reservation Medic Center I can't remember if it was a Grand Casino or it was one of those casinos down there. And the lady doctor put a scope on my chest. She said, his lungs are full. And by that time I was going in and out. And they couldn't get a helicopter. And my vitals were starting to shut down.
Mm-hmm.
They couldn't get a helicopter. The only thing they could get was an ambulance, and the closest hospital was about 50 miles away, which was in Meridian, I think, or somewhere right in that area there. And they said they wouldn't treat me at the Indian reservation unless I could prove that I had a quarter of Indian in me. So they said,
Jeez.
He's either going to die or we're going to have to try to do something to get him out of here.
Mm-hmm.
So they scrambled up an ambulance and took me as fast as they could go. And I remember by that time, man, I knew I was in serious, serious trouble. I knew that I was on my way out. And I get to the hospital there, and, I made it to the hospital, and they rushed me in there into the emergency room. I remember plugging all this stuff down my neck and hooking stuff into my veins. And at that time, I done knew right then and there. I said, man, this is a lot more serious. And I had enough in me that I could look up to the doctor. And I heard him talking about my heart rate. It was going down. I was losing oxygen so fast.
Mm-hmm.
He said, are you still with me? I said, yeah, but I said, I had enough breath in me to look up at him. I said, am I going to be okay? And at that time, I knew that I wasn't going to be okay. He reached out, and he was trying to comfort me while they were hooking me up and stuff, and things started getting darker. And I remember reaching up and grabbing him by the shirt collar, and I had enough in my arm where I could grab him. And I said, don't let me die. I said, don't let me die. Whatever you do, don't let me die. And I remember a tear come out of my eye, and the rest of the band was standing there watching this, or what they could see, because they were rushing to do everything they could to revive me. And he said, I'm doing everything I can, son. He said, just stay with us. And about that time, just like in the cartoons, you see, where you got the round circle and it goes black.
Mm-hmm.
It started closing in. And I knew that something was going wrong. I told him, I said, I can't see. And about that time, I had my hold of his jacket, and I watched my hand release, and I couldn't do nothing about it. And that little circle kept getting smaller and smaller and smaller, and it went totally black.
Blinked out.
Black. And the last words I heard him say before I went out was, we're losing him. And that's all I remember. And I fell into a deep, deep, dark pit. Man, as I was falling, I remember screaming and crying and begging. I pleaded and I begged, God, don't let me die. Don't let me, whatever happens. I said, I can't leave my son like this. I can't, my mom and dad, everything that they have went through for me. And I pleaded and begged. And I fell into a pit. It was so black. I mean, I knew I was somewhere where I shouldn't be. And I was reaching out trying to grab everything. And I was falling fast. And it was so ice cold. It was so cold that it was hot.
You felt yourself falling.
I felt myself falling. And as I was falling, I knew that I was falling in a deep, dark, black place. And it was bitter cold, and I knew that it almost felt like heat. It was so cold. It burnt my skin. And I kept crying and begging out to the Lord. And all of a sudden I stopped and just hovered. you know, and stopped in the air. And I
Mhm.
remember just kind of spinning around and,
Hmm.
or not spinning around, but just kind of
In a
feeling
limbo,
around.
like floating,
Yeah,
yeah.
floating. I was trying to grab something, see if I could feel something.
Mm-hmm.
But wherever I was, I couldn't touch nothing. I couldn't
Mm-hmm.
feel nothing. And then I heard a voice say, "I'm not through with you yet. I'm going to give you a chance."
You heard that voice.
I heard that voice. I mean,
Wow.
I heard it just as loud as me and you talking right now.
And you knew it was God.
I knew it was God. I knew it had to be from Him.
Mm-hmm.
You know, from that. And the only thing I could do was just bow my head and say I was sorry. And I done made so many messes, you know, at that time. I just totally just, man, everything that I'd done, it was just a huge disaster. But anyhow, back to the pit, when I heard that voice, I remember starting to come back up. There was like a pinhole light.
Mm-hmm.
And as I was coming back up out of that pit, I remember it getting brighter and brighter and brighter. And I thought, man, what's going on? You know, I thought I was done dead, but I wasn't. But when the brighter the light got, all of a sudden it got real bright, and I opened my eyes, and I was in a hospital room in a bed, you know.
Mm.
And at that time, I just broke down and started bawling, you know, because I knew that God had spared my life.
Mm-hmm.
And it was, you know, it was several years later before I'd made so many messes in my life, you know, and I'm not leaving the Tourette syndrome subject alone. I'm getting back to this, but during all that time, you know, it was several years. I'm guessing 8-9 years
From that
before I'd
point.
actually come back to the Lord. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
What had happened is, you know,
So that happened.
yeah.
Then what? Did you keep playing music in that band? Or
No,
what
I
happened?
actually quit that band, and
So you're in the hospital.
Yeah.
What did they say? Did they lose you clinically? Did they say that you clinically died?
they never made that statement, but they said that everything had shut down just for a split second.
Mm-hmm.
But that split second,
It seemed like forever.
it seemed like an eternity.
Yeah.
You know, for that small time, there was a lot that happened in my mind, or that happened in my spirit during that few seconds of whatever.
But there was a time from you were in the ER to then you were in a hospital bed, right?
Right, yeah.
You were out of it.
Yeah, and you know, my lungs. What had happened is I had developed double chronic pneumonia.
Mm-hmm.
Both lungs were completely full. You know, they went. I only
So
had,
God spoke that to you. I'm not done with you yet.
Yeah.
You still didn't get on track with the Lord.
No, it was. You know, I had a tough way for several years. You know, I went through another failed marriage.
How old were you then?
By that time, I guess I was about 27, 28.
When that experience happened?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and so, you know, I went back out west there and bummed around and worked a little bit and stuff like that, and had another failed marriage out there, and in the back of my mind all the time, I knew that my dad was still praying for me. I knew that my son was praying for me. I knew that God had healed me and had delivered me and done a lot for me. You know.
Did you ever get back on? Did Tourette's symptoms come back after that?
No, I had a period of time there where I think where I'd made so many messes and just done so much stupid stuff that, you know, I pretty much about I was close to having a breakdown.
Mm-hmm.
You know, but I knew that God had touched me with the Tourette's, and I mean, every now and then the devil would try to aggravate me and tell me, you know, well, look at you, you've done all this, you're going to get sick again, you're going to do this, you're going to do that. But I knew what I had felt when God had touched me as a child and healed me from that. I knew that, you know, I was fortunate. I can tell you this. I'm fortunate that I wasn't didn't get that disease back again like
Mm-hmm.
that and stuff. But
I mean, Tourette's is incurable.
yeah,
I mean, there's no cure for Tourette's.
no,
I mean,
there's no cure for it.
You can subdue the symptoms to
Yeah.
a degree, but you can't cure it.
Yeah, right. Well, I pretty much function like a normal person, I guess you might say. I don't know. Some people might not think I'm normal.
No, I'm just saying. So we got you up the band. You quit the band. You went out west. What'd you do? Body work and stuff?
Yeah, I done that, and I still, I depended on that money that I made in the clubs, and I still under conviction. I knew what God had told me when I was in that hospital. I never forgot that. But getting back to this is the deciding point. This is what all had happened. About 15 years ago, I guess, about 12. Well, it's probably between 12 15 years. I'd played clubs all the way up to that point. I'll be 49 in December. But up until that point, I stayed in the clubs. I depended on that money. I kind of settled down some. I was still drinking and experimenting with that. And the whole thing changed because one night I was playing at a club in Dayton, Ohio. And I was so miserable because I knew what God told me, what I needed to do.
Mm-hmm.
I knew that I had to change. And I was on the stage, and there was some people there that knew that I grew up in church, and I sang, played gospel music, and knew the whole Tourette thing. They knew the whole story about me.
Mm-hmm.
And they started yelling back there, have Bobby sing a gospel song. And I said, no, I'm not going to do that in here. It's at Johnny's Dayton Lounge, as a matter of fact, on North Dixie Drive in Dayton, Ohio. And I said, no, I'm not going to do that. I said, I might be a lot of things, might do a lot of things, but I know better than to bring reproach to that,
Mm-hmm.
And they kept hollering it, and I said, well, I'll sing one song. And I sang Will the Circle Be Unbroken. And while I was up there, I could feel my eyes water up because that conviction was setting in.
Mm-hmm.
And at the end of the night, in clubs, you always got all these people throwing. A lot of times, the girls just send their numbers up there and all this junk. Well, there was one girl come up there and threw a little napkin up there, and had some stuff written on it. Most of the time, I just pile that stuff up and throw it in the trash, But for some reason, this one kind of flipped open, and I didn't know that girl from Adam. Still don't know her. But when I opened it up, she said, I don't know who you are or what you are or where you come from. She said, but you're not supposed to be here. And she said, you scare me. She said, I don't know, when you would sing that song, something scared me. She said, I don't know, I don't want to come here, And right then and there, I knew, man, that if I didn't make a decision, if I didn't do something as far as making a commitment to the Lord and turning my life back over to Him like my mom and dad raised me, and like God had set me free and delivered me from the Tourette's and all the chaos that went along with it, that something dire or something bad was going to really happen to me. I'd felt it down in my bones. So I had a few more shows to do, and I had to play in Springfield. And my girlfriend, which is my wife now, I told her I was coming out of a place up there. I can't even think of the name of the bar. It might have been the 19th hole or something like that, some kind of little dive up there. I drank everything I could drink possibly that night, anything I could get my hands on. And I can't even begin to tell you how much I drank. But I was as sober as me and you sitting here talking. And when I come down off of that stage, I know that my dad and that my son and that several other people had to been crying out to the Lord. Because I come down, I was under conviction so bad. I told Denise, I took her by the hand, I said, we got to go. I said, I can't do this no more. I said, I don't know what it is or how I got to do it or what. Any way I could possibly do it. I got to Washington Courthouse coming from Springfield, and tears just started coming out of my eyes. They were just flowing. I was just crying and crying and crying. And she looked at me. She said, "What is wrong with you?" And I was just as straight as me and you talking right now. I pulled over to the side of the road on I-35, Washington Courthouse. I pulled the car off of the highway and bowed my head down at the steering wheel. And I said, "God," I said, "if you'll just reach down and help me to understand and help me to know what I got to do, I promise you that I will never, ever." I made a commitment. I said, "God, I make a firm commitment that I will never, ever, ever leave you." And from that time on, God has blessed me. I mean, I can't even say it right now. I'm crying every time I talk about it.
15 years ago.
Yeah. Well, no, that was actually, by that time, I guess it was probably about, see, me and Denise that's probably about 12, 13 years ago. Yeah. But man, I mean, it was just a blessing, because everything that I've been through, everything that I've done, it just, the whole thing in a nutshell is that God's mercy is, I can't thank Him enough for giving me, blessing me with talent, and blessing me with, the freedom from not jerking and barking like a dog, and just, I don't know, He just changed my life completely around. When I made that commitment to the Lord, I knew that I had to prove to Him. The first 2 years that I come back to the Lord was tough. I didn't have the clubs to fall on. I didn't have that income. I didn't, it was just hard. Me and Denise, when we first got married, I remember thinking, man alive. But I knew that I had to do some proving to the Lord. And I can never thank Him enough. I can never do enough for Him. But if my testimony can help anyone out there.
Tell me about when you worked on that plane and that went up and crashed.
Yeah, I was out west.
When was that?
That was during 9/11. I was working at a little airport in Mesquite, Nevada.
At what part of was you still playing clubs or?
Yeah, I was just kind of a part-timer then. That was after I went, or after I left Blue River, I'd married a girl out west there, and that was the other failed marriage that I was.
That's about 18 years ago.
Yeah. It was a bad time,
No, that was 2001.
Yeah, 2001. Yeah.
So that would have been 14 years ago.
Yeah. Yeah, because when I left there, I'd come out here and started playing the clubs. After me and her, we couldn't work things out. I'd come out here and started playing in the clubs, and that's when that happened there with the girl there.
Sent me
the letter up there. And I went right in immediately playing clubs as soon as I come back. I didn't have nothing else that I could do.
That's what you made your living, yeah.
And when I was out there, I was painting an airplane out there, and it was the first airplane I ever painted. And it was an old Vietnam push-pull Cessna plane, and I was so proud of that. And they were, my manager had come up to me and said, "Man, why don't you hop in that airplane and take you a ride, and we'll take a picture of you. This is your first airplane. We'll put it in the monthly magazine." And I told him, "No." I said, I don't know. I felt bad about it. I didn't feel good about it. And I said, "I'm just scared of airplanes." I said, "I don't mind painting them and all that, but I said, I'm not getting up in one." And so they made fun of me and harassed me about that. And the guy that come to pick that airplane up had to fly it to another terminal. And he'd come over, I was sitting in a chair, and he put his arm on my back and patted me, said, "Man," and he said, "You done a real job on that." And I said, "Well, I really appreciate that." And he said, "Well," he said, "You sure you don't want to take a ride?" And I said, "Nah." I said, I'll wait this one out." And I remember him taking off down the runway and going up in the air. and I heard the motor cut out a little bit, and I looked over at my boss and said, "Is that normal for them to do this?" He said they do it all the time. It's just, when they climb up in the air like that, they kind of will pop or do some kind of something every now and then. And as soon as he went over the hill, man, that plane went straight down, killed him instantly.
Man.
Yeah. God has spared my life several times, man. I mean, and I'll tell you, I'll be honest with you, and I just don't think that works for everybody. God's mercy was really, He extended it out, and I'm sure that was through having a praying family.
Yes.
And it's important to pray for your children, especially if they're lost. And
so, have you ever? I remember that you told me that you had somebody that they wanted you to go talk to their kid that had Tourette or something. Tourette's. Have you ever done that?
Yeah, I have. I've done a little thing in Flatwoods, where I live, Flatwoods, Kentucky. There for the one of my neighbors has a son that was diagnosed with it, and I can't remember exactly what it was. There's a little thing that a little group of people that gets together, some of the city hall type of people, and they had me do a little small seminar on it there, and they wanted to know these experiences, and I let them know, I appreciate what the doctor's done, but ultimately I really believe that it was God. Do
you still take some medication for it though?
Yeah, I take blood pressure medicine.
That's it.
Yeah, I take that. That's all I take is blood pressure medicine. That's because
Jeez.
Overweight maybe.
Well, I'm on 4 blood pressure medicines myself.
I take a metformin pill too. I take that. Yeah.
Pre-diabetes.
Yeah, if my sugar gets a little high.
Yeah. So you're like borderline diabetic.
Yeah. Yeah. They said if I lost about 20 pounds, I wouldn't even have to take that.
That Bobby, I got plenty to work on. And I'll write up. I'll probably write like a little essay or something. And like my testimony, it's been published on several websites over the years. It's a guy out in Virginia published it put it on his website. I had calls from all over the country. My testimony was in Billy Graham's Decision magazine.
Yeah.
And had calls on that, and then my testimony's on my website now. But I'll figure some way to get your story out.
Yeah,
we'll get it out.
Oh man, if it'll bless someone,
we will get it out.
The thing about it is, the whole thing in a nutshell is while there's time, and I feel like we're living. You hear people say we're living in the last days. I feel like we're living in the last moments.
Yeah.
I don't think there's a whole lot of time.
Yeah.
People need to get
it
right.
I mean, even when Paul the Apostle was writing in his letters, when they thought it was the last days then, Can you imagine now?
Yeah.
How much shorter it is now? But,
yes, sir.
Yeah, God's been good to you.
Yeah.
He sure has been merciful to you.
He has been awesome. And, through all this, through everything, I've got to become more, I guess, of a happy musician. I play good quality songs, and things that you and several others write.
You build guitars.
Yeah, man.
You build electric, and then you do the finishing on those cotton guitars.
Yeah.
That's
until
world
recently.
Famous guitars, aren't they?
Yeah, Cotton Guitars. Yeah, Gary Cotton. He's he's been a.
And you do the finishing work on them.
Yeah, up until just here recently. I still go out and help at the cotton shop every now and then, but I basically kind of backed off because of my schedule. I just took a position at the Wortland Church of God playing guitar for their praise band, and then I do the session thing, and then
play with Terry,
play with Dave Morrison band, and we do the family venues and stuff like that. It's really been a blessing, man. It's just.
Well, Bobby, I love you.
Love you too.
I've been praying for you ever since.